Hi, let's begin the review with just where we want to have things set in terms of our preferences for both Lightroom and for Photoshop. In Lightroom, I'm going to come up here, and the first thing I'm going to select is Lightroom and Preferences. I'm going to come over to External Editing, and in this I'm going to set down what I want Lightroom to open things up as in Photoshop. So I'm going to choose TIFF. You can choose PSD, but our recommendation is TIFF. The color space that I want to work with is Adobe RGB 1998. That's rather really important. My bit depth is going to be 8 bits. I don't want to work with 16-bit. It's just totally unnecessary at this point in time. Resolution, let's set to 300 because that is our standard printing resolution. And on compression here, let's just put none so that the TIFF is compressionless, meaning no information is brought into a smaller or more compact state. The next thing I want to do is close out of there, go back up to Lightroom, and then come into catalog settings. And I want to make sure that when I'm working with this catalog that I have under metadata automatically write changes into XMP marked. And that's just a little important thing so that each file contains the information that the catalog also contains as HTML metadata. Alright, going into Photoshop, coming into Preferences, I want you to understand that in general, you can handle the appearance, the number of maneuvers that you can go back to in history, how your scratch disk works, all of those kinds of things you can access and control through the preferences. Most important here is just going to be interface at first. What kind of color scheme we want to operate with in Photoshop. And possibly when we're working with full screen with menus and standard screen mode and full screen mode, what kinds of tones we want. Especially with the F key, we can choose if we want a custom background or one of the standards. Okay. Hit OK there. Under Edit, I want to come down to my color settings and click that, Edit Color Settings. And here, I want to just set up my standard working spaces. Now, as a photographer, my standard RGB space is going to be Adobe 1998. My standard CMYK space is going to be US Web Coded Swap version 2. Gray can be dot gain 20%, but I recommend that, oops, I chose the wrong one, that you choose Gray Gamma 2.2. And in the spot, you can leave alone. We're not going to use that. So Adobe RGB 1998 is the most important, but when we're working with a single channel grayscale file, Gray Gamma 2.2 is fine to use as the Gray Gamma color spectrum and the color space. All right. Under color management policies, it says to turn off, preserve the embedded profiles, or convert to the working RGB. In this case, converting to working RGB is fine to choose because everything we're doing is going to be operating in Adobe 1998. We're going to be very careful that everything that we have is Adobe 1998. And if we have something too big like ProPhoto, or if we have something too small like sRGB, we want those to be converted into Adobe 1998 so that we can operate with them in a standard kind of way. In terms of CMYK, it's up to you what kind of color management policies you want to use. If you convert to the working CMYK or RGB or grayscale, it's also often good to just ask Photoshop to tell you when you're pasting or opening or when there's a missing file to alert you so that you can make a decision at the moment. Our color engine is always Adobe ACE, and in terms of rendering a tint, especially in how we're operating with the color spaces, relative color metric is fine to operate with. We would not want to go to perceptual at this point in time. I'll go ahead and go, before we hit OK, let's go to Save. And okay, Adobe wants to access my contacts for some reason. I'll just ask it not to do that. And then I'm going to save these color settings as Doug Standard. or working standard. That way I can always have this as one of my options up here, and I don't have to reset these if something happens with the computer and it reloads. Now, that second window that just popped up that I closed was just a space where I was allowed to put notes about why I configured things this way. And that has to do with workflow. And as you can see, there's this little description down here that it corresponds to that little window, and I didn't write anything. Okay, get that? And that about covers it for the things that we want set up in Lightroom and in